Hello everyone, welcome to Module 4. You've almost made it to the end. So in this module, we're going to wrap up all the pieces. So far, you have taken some time to figure out a research topic. You have analyzed some literature on that research topic. And our next step is design a research study. So that's what we're going to do in this module. We're going to look at how do we design an action research project that you could easily implement in your classroom based on the research problem that you found and then the literature that you discovered in your last literature review. So what do we need to do in Module 4? First of all, skim or read Chapter 8 of the text. This chapter should help you figure out what are the different elements of a research study that you need when you are conducting action research in your classroom. Then participate in the 2 discussion threads. These are 2 pretty important discussion threads. One discussion thread asks you to think about what you have taken away from the action research project and how you could use that to encourage change and encourage continued growth from your colleagues in the field of equity. The other discussion thread is a chance for you to get feedback on your research plan. So you should post your final research presentation by July 14th and then try to give feedback to your colleagues by July 16th. That research presentation is pretty brief, and we'll go over that in a second, but it's basically a rough draft of the final section of your research plan. Then your research plan, which is the paper, is due on the 17th. Please make sure that you know that that's a day early, or 2 days earlier than the rest of the class, to give time for grading and processing so that I can get your grades turned in on time. So what are some things that we should think about when we're going into this final section of the paper? Remember that our goal here is to develop an action research project or a little experiment to figure out what is the effect of the intervention that we are proposing. So you found a research issue or you found a problem of practice in the first 2 or 3 modules. Now we're proposing an intervention and we're going to measure, did that intervention work to help fix the equity issue that you're dealing with in your school or classroom or office. So let's think about the setting and the context. The setting could be a school, it could be your office and the employees that you work with, it could be just a single classroom or a small group. But describe that setting. Where are your students? Where are your colleagues? And what is the context? Is this over 1 year? Is this over a few months? Is this over a quarter of a school year? So be sure to describe that. Then think about your participants and your population. Remember, your population is who you're trying to generalize your findings to. So if you're trying to study the impact of a certain instructional strategy on the growth of academic language in our English language learners, then your population is English language learners. Your participants or your sample size are the students that you're going to work with to measure the impact of that intervention that you're proposing, that academic instructional strategy that you're trying to put in place to help increase the academic achievement of your English language learners. Then your research question is the next thing you need to consider. At this point, most of you have already written your research question, but your research question should focus on the intervention and what is the impact that you're trying to measure. The next thing you need to think about is what are the steps for your intervention and how are you going to collect data? So for example, if my intervention is a certain instructional strategy that I want to put in place, then I'm going to talk about how I'm going to put that instructional strategy in place. I'm going to talk about how I'm going to collect data. And the key thing here is how often I will collect data. And then one more step is what data am I going to collect? And what might I hope to find from it? Obviously, that's where we're going to end our project. For most of us, we won't be able to implement our action research project, but our goal here is to plan it out. So, your final presentation. This is either a PowerPoint or a Google slideshow, and it can be as simple as 4 slides. On your first slide, share your research problem of practice and a few pieces of specific data that you found as a reference of how you came to this problem. This comes from Module 1 and Module 2. Second slide, share 2 or 3 big themes or big ideas that you found in doing your literature review. This is what we did in last module. And then slide 3, identify your research question and include the setting and the participants. And then slide 4, outline your research procedures and methodology. Include the data that you want to collect and how often you want to collect it. Try to post that brief presentation by the 14th to the discussion board thread so that you can get feedback from your colleagues to write the final paper. Now, don't worry about the final paper because you've already written a large chunk of it. So the first part of your paper is the statement of problem. Go back to your memo to your principal. That's basically what it is. Wordsmith it a little bit to make it seem less like a memo and more like an introduction to a research paper. The second part is your literature review, and I should have your literature reviews returned to you either tonight or tomorrow. Make the changes that I suggested or your colleague suggested or you feel should be made, and then just copy and paste that into your paper. And then the part 3 is your research design and methodology. Think about all those things that we just talked about here and that you got some feedback on here in the final presentation, and that's what you are writing in part 3 of your paper. This doesn't have to be long. 2 to 3 pages is more than sufficient. And then part 4 is your references, which again should be from module 3 in your literature review. Just make sure that you're also following APA format, which is not spelled with an E. Make sure you have the correct citations, title pages, page numbers, references, double-spaced, everything like that. Also, don't forget, as always, the rubric is the best place to look for your information. So your research plan presentation, make sure you're checking this box out here particularly, and make sure you're including everything in the research design. And then your paper is the same thing. There's some exemplars if you haven't checked them out yet, but there's the different steps. And then again, here's what you need. You're mainly focusing on this part right here, the research design and methodology. Just make sure that you are including in all 5 of those components. And again, this section should be about 2 to 3 pages. It doesn't have to be long and exhaustive. Once you're done, submit that by the 17th. And hopefully you feel like you're in a good place that if you wanted to take your findings from this class and put an action research plan into place, you could do that with the design that you have laid out. If you have any questions along the way, don't forget to reach out through email. I'll respond to you as quick as I can. But I don't want you to feel lost. I want you to feel confident going into this last part of our class. Hope that you all have a great week.